Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Women of the Bible Wednesdays. I hope you all have been well. My vacation was great, but I came down with a cold. However, I am getting better, so that's good news. Today, our woman of the Bible is someone who often takes a back seat in the story. But without her determination and resourcefulness, the book of Ruth would be non existent. Her name is Naomi. And about 10 years before her story begins, she moved with her family from Bethlehem to neighboring Moab because of a famine in Israel. And even though Moab and Israel were longtime enemies, her two sons married Moabite women. Unfortunately, tragedy struck. First, her husband died, leaving her a widow. And then sadly, her two sons die as well. Being a widow in ancient times was bad enough, but at least most had children to take care of them. Naomi has no one, except two daughters-in-law, Ruth and Orpah, both now widows themselves. And even worse, they were both childless. What is she going to do? What will happen to her now? Well, being stubborn as hell and not willing to throw in the towel quite yet, Naomi is determined to get back to her homeland of Bethlehem, some 50 wild and dangerous miles away, before she dies. Her daughters-in-law assume they will go with her, but she doesn't want them to. They stand a better chance of finding husbands if they remained in Moab. Orpah reluctantly agrees, but Ruth absolutely refuses. She would rather be torn apart by lions than desert Naomi. In fact, interestingly, what she says to Naomi has been repeated countless times by couples at their weddings. Wherever you go, I will go. Wherever you live, I will live. Your people will be my people, and your God will be my God. Wherever you die, I will die, and there I will be buried. May the Lord punish me severely if I allow anything but death to separate us. Beautiful, right? Well, hearing that and realizing how determined she was, Naomi had no choice but to take her along. And off the two childless widows go, one old and poor, the other young and an immigrant. Finally, they reach Bethlehem. And would you believe they're not there 5 minutes, and Naomi runs into some of her women friends from long ago. Having survived the famine and now relatively wealthy, they look at their poor, disheveled, homeless friend and exclaim, "Is that you, Naomi? What's happened to you?" Oh, she knows what's happened, what she looks like, what she's been through. She's gaunt, sad, hungry, depressed, afraid, embarrassed. And so she says, "Don't call me Naomi anymore. From now on, call me Mara," which means bitter. And I bet she was. The only good thing she did have was something the other women didn't. She had Ruth. Now, we don't know where they stayed when they arrived. Maybe the corner of the city with other homeless women, or maybe they scraped together enough pennies to afford a cheap room somewhere. But we do know they stuck together. And soon after arriving in Bethlehem, Ruth is able to glean in a nearby field, which means collect bits of grain left behind, something the poor were allowed to do. It was the ancient Near East form of welfare. Much like migrant workers, the poor were allowed to work the fields and follow behind, collecting what was left for themselves. It was hard work, long hours, and it was dangerous, especially for a young woman. As food, though, begins to fill the old woman's belly, she discovers, believe it or not, that the field in which Ruth is gleaning just happens to belong to a distant relative named Boaz. Go figure. And he has taken a liking to Ruth, protecting her and making sure she was safe and kept unharmed as she gleaned in the fields. Well, suddenly a light bulb goes off in Naomi's head, and she begins to strategize. She tells Ruth that this could be their ticket to survival, but she has to do what Naomi tells her. On harvest night, she is to clean herself up, put on her best clothes, splash on a little Chanel No. 5, and go to the threshing floor, where Boaz will be harvesting his barley. Knowing that Both food and wine will be flowing. Naomi tells Ruth not to say a word, but wait until he was basically drunk and happy and falls asleep, and then uncover his feet and lie down next to him. What is that all about? Ruth wants more details, but Naomi assures her Boaz will know what to do. Well, she follows Naomi's advice. And sure enough, when Boaz wakes up and sees what's happened, well, he's no doubt flattered because he does have feelings for her. And he's a much older man than her. Well, long story short, he doesn't molest her or take advantage of her, but sends her home with 6 large bags of grain and a marriage proposal. They marry, and a year later they have a son. And ironically, the same neighborhood women who taunted Naomi when she arrived now celebrate with her, even going as far as saying Naomi has a son. Naomi has a son. And for the most part, she did. Actually, she had more than a son. She had a true daughter-in-law, a son-in-law, and a grandson. And get this, she becomes the great-great-grandmother of King David. What I love about Naomi was her stubbornness, to not give in and just die there in Moab. To me, that's a sign of strength. I mean, each time something bad happened, she fought on. You know, with everything that happened to her, she could have easily assumed God had abandoned her. But she never went down that road. She never criticized God or even asked why. And I imagine that taught Ruth a wonderful lesson about faith and hope. So much so that Ruth said she was willing to make Naomi's God her God. Despite terrible hardship, she secured a new life for her and Ruth. And I'd like to think, maybe, help the Judeo-Christian world, folks like us, to look a bit more kindly on the plight of immigrants and migrant workers. I don't know. At least I hope so. Oh, and last but not least, she was the ultimate matchmaker. Now, my friends, please stay safe and get vaccinated. And if you're in a crowd, wear a mask. Do it for yourself and do it for others. Always stay hopeful. And in the midst of everything going on in our world, try and look for the blessings. Trust me, it's what keeps us going. Know I love you and I pray for you. And I'll see you next week. God bless you. Peace.